What does communication look like when you start to get some mastery around these skills? I think this is a very important conversation for us to have because the thing that will derail you more than anything, faster than anything, is when you have an expectation for something to go a certain way and then it doesn't go that way. And then you think it's not working or it just becomes something that's discouraging and you just stop pursuing that path. And I don't want that to be your experience. And the other thing that kind of hinders us is assumptions that we assume it's supposed to go a certain way and it doesn't. And that was definitely my path. For the longest time, I thought that at some point the intensity of my reactivity was going to decline, that I'd be able to meet these moments and just not have that intense reaction to certain things. And that has just not been my reality. And this is a path that I've been walking for over a decade now. And my reactivity is just as strong as it was 10 years ago. What's changed is my capacity to be with that, my ability to regulate the moment I'm aware that it's happening, my ability to choose the hard thing to say in that moment, my ability to remove myself from a situation if I'm just too far gone. And I know that the only thing that's going to come out is things that are going to make the situation worse. And resisting the urge to project. I think those are some of the strongest things that I've been able to develop in this arena. But by no means has the intensity of my reactivity declined at all. And I'm a very intense human being, and I feel like I experience reactivity in a more intense way than most people. And so when it's alive inside of me, it just everything becomes cloudy, everything becomes really fast, everything is just vibrating and screaming inside of me. And it is the most difficult energy to try to manage inside of my body. It is the most difficult thing I've ever done is trying to manage my reactivity in a moment where I'm trying to communicate. And even with all of the skills that I have with this, the reps, I teach on these things, I walk people through it, I do personal practice, I do couples practice, I practice this in all the communication I have with the people in my life. I still get it wrong a lot, especially in my intimate relationship. Andi is my intimate partner, and she also walks this path. And we do a lot of practices around this. And consistently, we have really good conversations around really hard things. And periodically, we get it wrong, and it goes sideways real fast, real bad. And it's really easy in those moments for me to beat myself up about it. It's like, how did I let it go to that place with everything that I know? As long as I've been doing this and all the tools that I have, how did I still allow my reactivity to get the best of me in that moment? And I think it's important to understand that we are also just human beings doing the best that we can. And I think what is so powerful with Andi and I is that we have that deep understanding that when either one of us gets really reactive in the moment, we know it's just because a hurt is being touched. We know that's not each other's truth if a hurtful thing gets said, and we allow the other person to clean it up. One of our mantras in our life, one of our values is that we go first. And so if there's a disruption, it's who can get themselves back to regulation the fastest and go back and clean it up. And that can be as simple as hey, that thing I said, can I take it back? I didn't mean it. I was reactive in that moment. I know it created hurt and I'd like to take it back. And the other person just saying, yeah. And most of the time, that simple thing is what clears the debris between her and I. Now, sometimes, yeah, like some really hurtful things get said, and it takes more than that to repair it. But oftentimes, and especially as you develop in this space and you realize that that's just their human coming out, somebody can just say, can I take that back? A lot of times, that's all it takes. And another expectation that I had was that the experience around having these conversations would become easier. And they just haven't been. It's still very uncomfortable. I still get very nervous going into that conversation. I still feel all of that intense emotional volatility inside of my body, as if this could go in any direction. When vulnerability gets exposed, there's also the part of you that gets very defensive and protective over that vulnerability. And so just trying to manage those things. But what has gotten better is my capacity to be with those energies. When that nervousness would be a reason to not have it, it's now a cue to lean in. I'm able to just allow that energy to just coexist in my system and find some comfort with it being there, not making it wrong, just knowing, hey, this is part of the experience. This is what a high stakes conversation feels like, and normalizing that energy. And then when I can normalize it, it allows me to access the other part of me where the communication that I'm wanting to have in that moment lives. That way, even if I'm feeling a certain way, I can still choose the best thing to say in that moment. Just the other day, I was preparing to have a high stakes conversation with Andi's 5-year old son. So she has a son and he lives in the home with us. And, him and I have had our ups and downs in our relationship and just getting acclimated to each other. It was very new and confusing to him to have a new man in his life and his mother's life. And there was some transition that needed to be had there. And for me, just being in a relationship with a woman that has a child and having that dynamic into my life for the first time. It was very new for the both of us, and we were just trying to find our way with it. And him and I have had some moments where both of us have gotten very reactive. And so that exists in our nervous system, and there's a bracing around that. And something that we've been working with him on is how to express his emotions skillfully. And so he was having moments where if he was getting dysregulated, he would scream in our face. And we were kind of softly working with him on appropriate ways to express that. And we just weren't getting him to where we need him to be with it. It kept happening. And I knew that I needed to have this conversation with him. And so it was a Sunday afternoon, and I was in the backyard. I was mowing the yard, and he was helping me pick the weeds out of the rocks. And I knew this was the time for us to have this conversation. And I got nervous. My heart was racing. Everything was moving fast. I was looking for like that perfect moment. And there was a couple times where I thought it was it. And then I hesitated a little bit. And then he finished what he was doing. He was about to go inside. And I was like, hey, bud, can you come out here for a second? He was like, yeah. And I had to be really intentional here because if I say something like, hey, can we talk? Hey, can we sit down and talk about something? Like immediately, that tone, those words shut him down instantly. And so I knew I had to come in a different direction. And so I was going to test out a new approach and I wasn't sure if it was going to work or not. And so I was nervous about it. I was nervous it was going to create a disruption, that it would somehow filter into the rest of the evening and just ruin the night. And there was just a lot of unexpected intense emotion that was inside of me. I was really surprised how uncomfortable I was going into this conversation. So I just told him, I was like, hey, I just want to let you know that, because he splits time between us and his dad, that when you come next time, that we're going to be doing something a little differently here. And I just want to let you know what that was. And he was like, okay, what is it? And so I shared with him, I said, well, I've noticed sometimes when you get upset that you you're screaming in my face or your mom's face, and I just want to let you know that we're not going to be doing that here anymore. That it's okay to be angry, and it's okay to express that emotion, but we don't do it in people's faces like that. And he got curious. He was like, oh, he's like, well, why? And so I explained to him, well, if you get mad at somebody, is it okay to punch them? And he's like, no. And I was like, well, think of it that way. When you scream in somebody's face, that's like a verbal punch. That's what it feels like. It hurts. It hurts our feelings when that happens. And we don't ever want to hurt each other, do we? And he's like, no, I don't. No, not at all. And I was like, okay, so that's why we're doing it. And so I just want to make sure that you understood that so that when you come here next time, that's how we're going to be behaving with each other. Cool? And he was like, yeah, okay. And that was it. And he went inside, Oh man, I was just elated. I was like, oh, that conversation couldn't have gone better. And since then, he's aware of it now. I've caught him get upset and start to do it, and you can see it in his eyes. He's like, "Oh wait, if I do that, that's hurting their feelings. I gotta express this in a different way." And we're teaching him other ways to do that. But the reason I share that story is that it was a high stakes conversation, and it was with a 5-year old, and it's because that my relationship with him is very important, and it felt like if I were to navigate that wrong, that relationship was at risk to a degree, that I was gonna hurt it somehow. And so these conversations show up in all these different ways. And as long as I've been doing this and feeling that I'm very masterful around all these skills, I was still incredibly nervous to have this conversation with a 5-year old. And I wouldn't expect that that would have been my experience, but it was. And so even when you're in this game for, as long as I am or even longer, it's, the emotions that are going to come with these different moments are still going to be there. And what we're learning how to do is how to be aware of them, how to manage them in the moment, and how to choose the skillful word or action or behavior that's going to meet that moment. And when we can do that, then there's no moment that's going to get the best of us. We're always going to be capable of creating any scenario, any experience that we want with the moments that we are maneuvering. And that gives you so much power in your life, so much control in a way, knowing that nothing's going to pull you out of your center. Nothing's going to cause you to collapse. And if for whatever reason something does, you know how to get right back to it so that it doesn't create unnecessary suffering or weight or heaviness in your life or create an experience that's ongoing that just doesn't feel good because you build this awareness for those feelings, you check in, you find out what it needs, and you do the thing that it's asking for. And when we can do that, that is how we live a quality life. And that's why we're having this conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to have this talk with me. And I'll see you next time.